An hour from now, Roman soldiers will break down a door in this palace and find the most powerful woman in the world resting still on a golden chaise. Her two handmaidens will be at her feet. The cobra crown will sit perfectly straight on her brow, and the man who handed her the basket of figs will be standing in the corridor outside, counting his own heartbeats. That man is you. You don't know it yet, but the Empire of Egypt has 38 minutes left. 3,000 years of pharaohs, pyramids that were already ancient when your queen was born, a river that has watched dynasties rise and fall like tides. And it all ends in a chamber you have polished 1,000 times, with a basket you carried through a marble corridor while the harbor burned at your back. The figs are sweating in the August heat. Underneath the leaves, something is moving, something small, something sacred. Something your queen asked you for, not as a command, but as a request, using your real name, the one she had never spoken in 15 years of service. You will give her what she wants. You already know that. The choice was made years before this morning. It was made the day you were 8, and your mother sold you across a wheat field she would not turn around to leave. It was made the first time a queen walked past you in a corridor, and the guards straightened without being told. But to understand how a slave came to hold the death of an empire in a wicker basket, we need to go back. All the way back. The basket is heavier than it should be. You feel it first in your wrists, then your shoulders, then in the place behind your sternum where breath lives. Figs. Just figs. Plump, purple, sweating in the August heat of Alexandria. That's what the Roman guards saw when they let you pass through the palace gate. That's what they wrote in their report. A slave, a basket, a queen's last meal. They didn't see what you felt moving underneath the leaves. The marble under your sandals is warm from a sun that has watched this city die for 3 days. The harbor is still burning. You can taste it, pine resin and pitch and something else, something sweeter that you've learned not to name. Your queen is waiting at the end of this corridor. She is 39 years old. She speaks 9 languages. She has outlived 2 of the most powerful men in the world. And in the next 20 minutes, on August 12th, in the year that Rome will one day call 30 BC, she will ask you to hand her this basket. You will hand it to her. But to understand how you ended up here, with a queen's death cradled in a slave's hands, we need to go back. You were 8 years old when they brought you to the palace. Your mother sold you. She didn't want to. She had 4 other children, and the grain harvest had failed, and the Ptolemies paid in silver, real silver, not the debased coin the Romans had started flooding into the provinces. She kissed your forehead. She told you that to serve in the house of the pharaoh was a kind of holiness. Then she walked away across the wheat field and didn't turn around, because if she turned around, she would not be able to leave. You remember the field more clearly than her face. The palace swallowed you. You learned the rules in your first week. You do not look at royal blood. You do not speak unless spoken to. You move through corridors like water, silent, low, finding the shape of the space around you. You learned that the Ptolemies were not Egyptian. They were Greek, descended from one of Alexander's generals 3 centuries before, and they ruled Egypt the way a hand wears a glove. The two never fully became one thing. The pharaohs before her had refused to even learn the language of the people they ruled. She was the first one who did. You were 12 when you first saw her. She was 21. She had just returned from exile, smuggled into her own palace, the stories said, rolled in a carpet, delivered like a gift to a Roman general named Julius Caesar, who was, that very night, deciding whether to crown her or kill her. By morning, he had decided. She walked the corridor where you stood polishing brass. She did not look at you. Slaves did not exist to her in the way a fish does not exist to a bird. But you saw her. You saw the way her sandals barely made sound on the stone. You saw the way the guards straightened without being told. And you understood, for the first time, that power is a kind of gravity. This is the part no one tells you about serving a god queen. It isn't terror, it's love. A strange, impossible, doomed love that has nothing to do with romance and everything to do with belonging to something larger than your own small life. You polish her sandals, you fold her linen. You learn the smell of her perfume, myrrh and lotus, and something resinous from the trees of Punt, and the smell becomes the smell of order, of a world that makes sense, of mornings that will continue. You serve her for 15 years. You watch her give birth to Caesar's son in the eastern wing, and you watch the Romans pretend the boy doesn't exist. You watch her stand on the prow of a ship at Tarsus, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, and you watch a Roman warlord named Mark Antony fall in love with her so completely that he forgets he has a wife in Rome, an army in Parthia, and a republic that will never forgive him. You watch her bear 3 more children. You watch her name them after suns and moons. You watch her teach her son Caesarion how to read hieroglyphs his grandfathers refused to learn. You watch her become the last pharaoh. Most people don't know what that word means at the end, pharaoh. They think of gold masks and pyramids. But by your queen's time, the pyramids were already older to her than she is to you. Egypt had been ancient for 2,000 years before her grandfather was born. And she knew. She knew she was standing at the edge of something. She knew the river of her dynasty was about to meet the sea. Here is the part that will hurt. You were there at Actium. Not on the ship, slaves did not ride to battle, but in the palace, in the dark, when the messenger came at midnight with sea salt in his beard and his hands shaking. You watched her face when she heard. The fleet was lost. Antony had thrown himself into a sea battle he could not win because he could not bear to be apart from her. And the Romans under Octavian had cut his ships to splinters. Antony was alive. The empire was not. She did not weep. That is the thing about her you would remember longest. Other women in the palace wept, servants wept. You wept, hidden behind a column, because you understood before anyone said the word that this was the beginning of the end of everything. But she did not weep. She walked to the window. She looked east toward the harbor, and she said one word so quietly that only you, crouched against the marble, heard it. Caesarion. Her son, 16 years old, the last living drop of Julius Caesar's blood. The boy Octavian could not allow to live. That night she began to plan the death of her own dynasty. You did not understand at first. You watched her summon the priests of Isis. You watched her sell the temple jewels. You watched her send her son and a small retinue south, up the Nile, toward a port on the Red Sea, where a ship would carry him to India. India. A word that meant nothing to you except distance. She kissed his forehead the same way your mother had kissed yours, 20 years before. She told him she would follow when she could. She lied. She knew she was lying. He knew she was lying. He went anyway, because that is what you do when your mother is a god. You obey, even when she is sending you somewhere you cannot reach her. You watched her walk back into the palace and close the door. And then you waited for Rome. Antony came home first. He stumbled into the harbor like a man returning from his own funeral. He had tried to fall on his sword in Greece, then changed his mind, then succeeded too late and not enough. The wound was deep but slow, and his men carried him bleeding through the streets of his lover's city. They could not take him to her on a stretcher. The palace was sealed. Octavian's spies were already inside the walls. So they hauled him up by ropes to a high window in the mausoleum where she had locked herself with her treasures and her 2 handmaidens. You were in the courtyard below. You watched her and her servants drag a dying Roman general up the side of a tomb with their own hands. You heard the sound he made when his weight pulled against the wound. You heard the sound she made. And that one you will hear in your sleep for the rest of your life. It was not a scream. It was something underneath a scream. The sound a person makes when the language they have been speaking all their life suddenly fails them. He died in her arms. Octavian's men were already at the gate. The next 2 days you do not remember clearly. You remember the heat. You remember a Roman officer interrogating you about the layout of the palace, and you remember lying. Small lies, harmless lies, The only resistance a slave is permitted. You remember her face when they finally allowed you in to see her. She had cut her own arms in mourning. Her hair was loose. She had not eaten. And yet, somehow, when she turned to look at you, she was still her. Still the gravity, still the queen. She asked you for one last thing. She did not order, she asked. She used your name, your real name, the one your mother gave you, the one she had never spoken in 15 years of service. She told you Octavian planned to take her to Rome. She told you he would parade her through the streets in golden chains for the citizens of the city to spit on. She told you she had spoken with Caesar. She had loved Antony. She would not be a trophy. She asked you to bring her a basket of figs. You knew. Of course you knew. The asp, the small horned viper of the Nile, was sacred to the goddess Wajet. To die from its bite was to be marked by divinity. To die from its bite, in Egypt, on this day, was to walk into the next world as a god. You went to the market. You spoke to a man who did not ask questions. You returned with the basket. Here is the part the histories will get wrong. They will say you were brave. They will say you were loyal. They will say a slave who helps a queen die is participating in something noble, something tragic, something fit for poets. The poets do not have to carry the basket. The poets do not have to feel the weight shift faintly beneath the leaves as the small, dark thing inside it adjusts to the heat of your palms. You are not brave. You are not noble. You are a man holding the death of an empire in a wicker basket, and your hands are shaking, and you are walking down a marble corridor toward the only person in the world whose existence has ever made you feel like you mattered. You hand her the basket. She looks at you. She does not say thank you. Thank you is a word for equals. She says something else, in Egyptian, in the language her ancestors refused to learn, a word that has no clean translation but means, roughly, go in peace, you are seen. And then she dismisses you. She does not want you in the room for what comes next. Some kindnesses are also commands. You leave. You close the door. You stand in the corridor. You do not move. You do not breathe. You count your own heartbeats and you wait. And at some point, you don't know when, time does not work in that corridor. You understand that it is done. Octavian's men break in an hour later. They find her on the golden chaise. Her 2 handmaidens are dead at her feet. Her crown, the cobra-shaped uraeus, the symbol of 3,000 years of pharaohs, is set straight on her brow. Octavian, they say, stood in the doorway and was silent for a long time. He had wanted her alive. He had wanted Rome to see her broken. She had not allowed it. You will live another 30 years. You will be sold to a Roman household. You will see Caesarion captured at the Red Sea port, betrayed by his own tutor, executed by Octavian's order before he ever reached India. You will see her other 3 children paraded through Rome in the chains she refused to wear. You will watch the new emperor change his name to Augustus and turn Egypt into a Roman province. You will live to see the last Egyptian temple still using hieroglyphs, and then you will live to see them stop. A whole language, a whole people, a whole way of understanding the universe, slowly, gently, like a tide going out, erased. But sometimes, when you are very old, and the August heat in some Roman villa reminds you of a harbor that no longer burns, you will close your eyes, and you will smell myrrh and lotus and something resinous from the trees of Punt. And for a moment, you will be 12 years old again, polishing brass in a corridor, and a woman will walk past you who does not look at you, and the guards will straighten without being told, and the world will make sense. Some queens don't die. They get carried. You carried her. And the basket was never heavy because of what was inside it. The basket was heavy because you understood even then that you were the last man in history to hand a pharaoh anything at all.